It was.
Thanks, Yolanda.
Cool. All right. We have bring this governance committee meeting to order. Say my little spiel, which is over here now. So, this meeting is being recorded in accordance with Montana law. All those in attendance are advised that the public portion of this meeting will be recorded in a video format. The remaining of the meeting will consent to being recorded, and despite the footage that was posted on the school district's website, please contact the district office if you have any questions concerning Cameron School District's reporting obligations under Montana's meeting law. Any public comment? Anything on there? Okay. Nothing. All right. Go for it.
Okay, so we received some notification from the 21st Judicial District. They provide funding for our iStand and Cali programs. So basically a reimbursement based on the number of students that we serve each day. They no longer have that funding, and so obviously they can't provide that reimbursement to us. So if you look in your packet, there is, it's on the back page of that first back page of the agenda. You get a little sense of what those, we have an iStand in the middle school, an iStand in the high school, and then the Cali in the middle school. So you can see what the reimbursements were the last couple of years. So it's not, it's nothing to scoff at. It's money that, you know, obviously we won't have going forward. I'm glad that they notified us at this point, as opposed to later on down the road. But yeah, that's just another financial hit for us. So just letting you know that that's the case. Okay. Next item is the mural project. First of all, the mural that was approved was the logo with some striping. One of the things that I know Andrea is talking to me about, and Jessica Beisel is volunteering to do some of this in the summer. That's going to require some board action to do that over the summer. The alternative to that is having Jamie and the crew maybe take care of that if it's a stencil thing, but I know that might defeat the purpose of the kids doing it. So there's just a lot to, the timing isn't awesome. We're running at the end of the year here. And I don't know, maybe, I don't know if there's a possibility of that becoming a fall project either, but.
The challenge with that is Jessica will not be doing leadership in the fall, so it will be different students and a different teacher. So that's, I mean, it can be done. It just would be transferring that to the teacher who's taking it on.
Yeah, and if the kids are helping in the summer, there would need to be some liability sign off too. So if that is something to think about before we get to our meeting on Tuesday, we would need to maybe do some approval for her to do that in the summer and then sign up for liability for the students. So.
It's doable. I mean, if you wanted to do that, so they get their, you know, proverbially hands wet.
Yeah.
Have they gotten started on the project yet?
No.
They have started, so what they're actually doing right now is practice pieces. They've found they've got some pieces of tin that are equivalent to what's there, and they're working on creating a stencil to place over and have been practicing their spray painting skills so that it doesn't look trashy. So.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I mean, I think, if they're doing it, I think that's, I prefer that over Jamie doing that.
Adding more to it. Yeah.
So if we have to put the, liability stuff in, I'm more ahead of that.
And are they motivated to come in during the summer and do it?
Yes, the kids who came up with this idea are really excited about being the ones to do it.
It's great.
Then I say, let's try to move ahead with that one rather than, so that they can continue the project.
Andrea, anything to add about the other two? These were left for us to discuss. This is just me talking, I'm a little apprehensive about murals that are not logo kind of murals on the exterior of buildings. I would rather if we did that, like create a space internally to create that, but that's just me. So I'm just putting that out there.
I mean, I agree with that part of it. I do think there is ongoing conversation every year about the feel of the playground and the paint on the outside. So the hope is to do something that makes the playground feel a little more like a school and, as I said, less like a prison yard. But I don't know that the mural has to be the thing to do that, and we've done some things on the inside, so we could definitely transfer these ideas to the inside of the building, and that wouldn't be a problem, but we would like to pursue something for the outside of the building.
The exterior.
or we can, I don't know, we can think of things, because the other thought process, you know, basically comes with, where we basically hang something, you know, like they can design it, whatever, and we hang it, and then we can take it down if necessary, that'd be another option, rather than basically putting it right on the wall, because then we have to upkeep the wall, right, forever and ever and ever.
Right.
But if it's a banner of some sort, which I'm not gonna, we're not going to banners, but if it's something, but if it's something like that, where we, kind of like the big giant banner that we have in the high school that drops and stuff like that, but something like that, where all we have to do is put something to keep it up. That would be a possibility to improve the outside things, but then it would not be a permanent structure. Something, but they can design it. And I don't know, something.
And it could be an annual project where that's changed and you approve the new thing and then you hang the new one. I don't know, I've seen some schools do things like that where they have a frame essentially that they are exchanging each year. So that is certainly an option.
That might be a kind of a good in between where you have the ability to improve the outside space, but without us having to repaint like every single time.
Right.
So this would be a banner, and then it'd be something they can fundraise for, or whatever.
Frenchtown has that in their gym where a class has a large framed piece of art that class gives, and there's, I don't know, 20 different classes, 20 different pieces of art. So that seems kind of cool.
And then you could, like, you know, preserve it and stuff like that, and preserve it within. So maybe we can look at that as a possibility, because then they can spend their time designing it and stuff, and then present it. It'd be cool to present it or something at some point, say, hey, this is what we're gonna display it. We'll display it. So anyways, just another.
That's the wheels turning, yes.
So a different way of doing it, and that would be easy to basically put anchor bolts in or something like that, and we're not, and so, something like that. So, just another way to keep the creative juices going, but not, you know, basically, because the problem is like, if it's there for a while, then we get classes that don't really want to do it, and then we get,
Right,
now we're
the
doing
maintenance
this.
is
The
challenging.
maintenance becomes challenging, and we know how much, pain it costs to do, like, I saw the numbers on how it is to come to Washington, and it's incredibly expensive, so, like, so like, trying to do that is, so this might be the way to, just another thought process.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, we'll continue that conversation and explore some of those other options then. Just a preview then, next item, number 5, is the preliminary budget sheets for next school year. And so you've got, if you get to the preliminary budget, the OPI sheet, on the back side of that, Kathy has starred the budget for next year, which is $14,514,000. And then the, this year's budget was $14,740,000. So a difference of $226,000 to the negative. So obviously, you know, that's kind of created a little bit of a stress and strain on the district. And so that's creating some decisions that need to be made. On the back side of the next page is a table that basically walks through the A and B. The culprit here is a reduction of 98, essentially 80 student enrollment. That's at the cause of that. So you can kind of see at each place where some of that's coming from, but that's ultimately what's driving that reduction.
So going forward, though, you know, obviously this is the correction, this is the Polytech correction.
It really is the Polytech correction, yeah, which was inevitable. And yeah, it just is a little sooner than what we had anticipated that happening.
Right, so, but I guess my point is that after this correction, we should be looking into the next year, 27, 28, we will not make another Polytech correction, so.
Right.
I know we have decreases, you know, but those are, I would say, you know, that's our normal up and down and stuff like that. But the 68 drop in Polytech is
It's significant, yep,
monster. But
for sure.
makes me feel a little bit better in terms of 27, 28, because we will not be losing, we won't be as underwater,
Right.
because of that.
And we do, in the next, not this next fiscal year, but the fiscal year following that, we will get a little bump for future ready payments, so dual credit, certifications, all of those, which, we've done a very good job at setting up those systems, and I think that that's gonna be very helpful.
Gotcha. So no, I guess this year is the development year, and then the next year should be better.
I agree with you, yes, totally agree with you.
So,
Speaking of budgets, so change to state law. So the countywide equalization rather than taxable value that would be based on just our school district. Okay, Kathy, correct me if I get any of this wrong or screwed up. So the taxable value has been calculated by just our school district, now it's countywide. So the taxable value, I would anticipate will be a higher number. The mills, you actually on our budget sheets, you don't actually see. And so comparing the number of mills that is being assessed from this year to next year, you're not gonna be able to do that. It's comparing apples and oranges anymore. And so I know that's always been something that schools talk about, is trying to keep those mills in the same ballpark, but they won't be because the goalpost is moved.
So it'll be a much less
Yeah,
than
should be.
should be,
what.
should be good for us.
Yeah.
So the amount of money we are generating stays the same. The pot we're drawing from changes, therefore the mills calculated to generate that sum of money changes.
The mill now is worth more. So,
So it'll be a county-wide levy, just like in retirement where they pool the whole county. And then they just divide it up by how much you need. And this will be funding the base budget. So then the mills that you'll see will be the amount that the voters have approved in excess of that base budget.
So the government decided we're no longer gonna tax the school, for the schools in the school district boundaries. They're eliminating that countywide.
Yeah, I think this is in response to what happened, this is like the difference between like us and Victor. And where we have a larger tax base, and then we were doing this, and we were charging Victor at a high rate for their students. And that was, and so this was the correction from, I think this was Dave bill as well, to correct that thought process. So we weren't basically crushing these small schools, and so to do it for county, so.
okay. All right, next item is the food service policy 8205. And so Kathy has included a couple of agendas from 2023. So this policy was actually approved back in 2023. So we are just kind of making this right again or going back to where we were. The policy is one thing, and essentially the policy is saying, hey, we aren't, if a student is in the negative or can't pay, we are not gonna penalize them, we are gonna feed them, period. And we're not gonna feed them with an alternative lunch, we're just gonna feed them lunch or breakfast or whatever meal that they're getting. And so that is pretty uniform in most places. So the policy is one thing. I think the discussion about meals comes with, what do we do about unpaid meal balances? And so I spent some time talking with other districts, and to the letter, nobody has a good solution, like nobody. And they do a variety of things that they try, but nothing really solves the problem. One of the things that I think is a really big benefit for us in Hamilton is we've got the Greater Valley who contributes to help with some of that. We have the Two Doves, that contributes to helping families with some of that. I have it on my list to have a conversation with Friends of Hamilton Schools to see if that's something that they want to fundraise for. Don't know if that's in their mission or vision, but we have some mechanisms to try to help with this. Essentially, I have not talked to anybody that takes this all the way to the point where they send families to collections. People are very apprehensive to do that. If you look at, and there's some more data in here, Kathy's got a table, it's this page here, that kind of shows you what the balances are and the number of students that are in those ranges. I think if we're going to develop a strategy, essentially 133, if you take the 113 and the 20 from the bottom or the least amount of, so that's basically 80% of the people affected or the families affected, and really try to target and try to create systems that help those families to, whether it's with the Two Doves, their, a shared strategy to help, pay off the balance, or just the notification system. How often are we notifying? When are we notifying? And trying to be proactive to prevent those 133 situations from getting into that top level, and trying to deal with them when they're small and not deal with them when they're large. The other thing that we have to consider as a procedure too is how do we deal with donations that come in, because they do come in. Do we have a strategy where we divide it amongst the 170 families or accounts? And then essentially you're adding $1 to everybody, which doesn't seem like it's making much of an impact? Or do you handle, your highest balances first or your lowest balances first? There's a lot of discussion points there. I just been kind of trying to frame that conversation a little bit there, but it's an issue. There are, and in comparison, we're at a level of about $16,000 in comparison to some of our neighbors, which will remain nameless. That's lower than many of them. Many of them are in the $30,000, $40,000 range. Some are over 100. So thoughts, ideas? Nick, you thought about any of this?
It's a tough situation.
Yes,
It is.
Well, and if you see, these are just the families or students that qualify for paid. On the free and reduced, they still get charged. If the kids have second meals or extra milks or things like that. So that's what we're using the Greater Valley Fund for, and they, approved us basically, for that, so that those kids don't have those charges for the additional meals. But
Do we know if it's predominantly elementary versus middle? Not that
it's
You
got
can see the grade level
grades.
next to these.
right. Without having to calculate, I just didn't know if you guys had done that breakdown.
Well, and I think that's kind of why I included the grades, because there's some, there's some elementary grade students that are getting large balances, and, if that continues till they're in high school.
Well, that's, in some ways, that's what I'm kind of curious in terms of thought process. If it's a continuing balance, like basically stop it early, right? So what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, so, and we've talked about this before, Bozeman, everyone pays, they pay their lunches, right? It's free lunches in all of Bozeman, that's how it's been for multiple years now. And we kind of looked at that price tag is pretty big overall, but the question is, where is that line, right? Where is the line of, well, we're $16,000 in the hole, where is that, maybe we need to look at elementary school and say, we're gonna pay for lunches in elementary school, and then know that middle school and high school, they don't accumulate nearly as much. So that's some thought processes there too, just saying, that's maybe where we need to put the money in to say, we're gonna do free lunches here because this is a headache we don't really want. Early, knowing that middle school and high school, they just don't accumulate the same amount of balances, they just don't eat as much in the cafeteria. Maybe a little bit more in early middle school, but definitely not high school. They may go and do that kind of stuff. Plus, we have a little bit more, I hate to say, a little bit more aggressive ways to do things in high school, because we can say, you know what? We ask for money all the time for activities, all sorts of stuff in high school, that we can say, your bill is here too. Elementary school is just a little bit of a different animal there, because we do ask that it's a different one. So it's as I said, kind of a different way of thinking about it.
At the high school, the nutrition break
Yeah,
gives them an additional way to accumulate because if they eat breakfast and they eat lunch, the nutrition break counts, if they say it's a free or reduced kid, they get one, or the nutrition break will count as breakfast if they had eaten breakfast already, but if they don't, then that's an additional charge. So actually the breakfast at the high school, because they count the nutrition break, there's more to eat that than lunch.
so I'm just trying trying to figure out a different mechanism to think about it. How it works in terms of that. It's just kind of working through some of these issues.
It is, and I don't know that there's a great solution, but there's a lot to think about there too. I have another spreadsheet similar to this that has highlighted in almost all of these situations, at one point or another, those families qualified for free or reduced lunch. There's very few that have never qualified. And so, like as of this year, they were above the threshold, so they didn't qualify for either. And then you start getting the accumulation. And I think part of that is it's become a habit.
Sure.
It's just, I'm going to pay for these and I'm used to getting my meals free, and now all of a sudden parents are surprised by a lunch dinner.
I think the other challenge is the one that you can ignore and nothing happens. It's the last thing that's gonna get paid, unfortunately.
Right, you're absolutely right.
I don't know, those phone calls get you pretty good. So. I catch you to pay.
That's true.
But if you ignore them, then you just don't answer.
So I guess, kind of mirroring this as we look at other things, is like, how do we offset this with other programs? So one of the things we've talked about is food trucks, all that kind of stuff. Can that be used to offset some of this? Saying using food trucks in other states. I know we've talked about using them for athletics and some in field stuff, but maybe this is a better use. Food for food, basically. Thinking about different ways to offset that debt, right? Kind of coming up with creative ideas of how to do that. Of using those potentially as ways to offset this. If we're bringing in food trucks and saying, you have to pay a percentage to us to do that, or whatever, that might offset, because it's a debt, it's a debt, right? We're paying money, so we're paying things, so we gotta figure out how to make that whole, right? So figuring out, regardless of which way it goes, how to make that whole, is another thought process.
Couple thoughts from me. One, we're assuming that we should be feeding the kids. I question that thought process. I think we should be in the business of educating the kids, not feeding the kids. That being said, if we're going to feed the kids, this is something, and there are problems, like this is something I would support raising money for.
Yeah.
I'm also fully against the idea of raising money for our activities. I just gave one of our kids $100 for his baseball program. I get it, but I don't think we should be doing that. If we have kids who are struggling to eat, I'm happy to participate in any kind of fundraisers to help that cost as opposed to, I want to go play baseball or track. I mean, we've done it. I mean, we do it too. So anyways, that's, if we're gonna feed the kids, the whole student body can participate in a fundraiser to chip away at the balance that we have. Not singling anyone out, not doing anything, but hey, there's a need, we have a debt. Let's chip in and step up for this.
I think, my concern, like, I think we should feed the kids, and the reason I do that is because it's been shown a zillion times over, if their kids are hungry, they just don't perform right.
I don't question that at all.
And so I think your point is absolutely, it's like trying to figure out ways to limit this and continue to feed, and I think is the way to go. And continue to kind of work through that thought process of how we offset this. Because I think the problem is like, and I think this is the biggest kicker, is that there is no good way to go after them. Because collections is miserable, and you only get, if Eli was here, he would tell you, because he has to do collections for his business, he barely gets 20% of what he's chasing.
But he still does it.
Yeah, but it's still, it's a miserable
He still
experience.
does it, so it must be to some advantage.
Yeah, but it's a stain, right? And it's
Yeah.
different, and I think that's the problem is. So, I mean, we could continue to try to go down there, and it's just, it's a damaging world like that.
Yeah.
So,
So with this policy, there's almost two separate things that we need to do. So one, we should, or the board should approve the changes to the policy because the changes that are in there are reflecting what's actually happened where, the kids don't get the alternative meal. So that's the basis of the policy change. And then there is the part in there that with board approval, they can, we send them to collections, but we definitely need to work on the procedures and have formulated, well, what does that look like? So there's the debt portion and then the policy portion.
Yeah, so essentially we approved the policy and then at the time where we would consider coming to you to see if you want to send somebody to collections, then I think that's the conversation we have on that.
It's the procedural things that happened underneath the policy that we will need to iron out and get that sort of stuff in order. I think the policy as written is right and good, and that's really what our practice reflects right now. But we need to do some work on how and when we communicate with families.
I think sending a family to collection should be our absolute last resort, and I think we can come up with other creative ways to
To deal with it.
meet the balance besides sending them to collections.
Yeah,
And that's
but
what-
like I said, like they're responsible for the bill, like not feeding a child is not, a resort we go to before we send the parents to collection. I don't think it's the last resort. I think the very last resort is not feeding kids. Because ultimately, like the kids suffering, they're the ones who's embarrassed because their account, and most of them know it. And their parents get mad if they, get a balance. Like, a lot of these kids are aware, a lot more than you would think.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, it's the parents who's responsible for it. And I think they should be held accountable for what they're,
yeah, and that's why.
in some aspects, they need a little bit of accountability.
Without, because if we can figure out that, then this headache goes away, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing the two things that I think is like, we're taking care of kids, and it's gonna improve their education because we're able to feed them. And I know that, I'm not gonna battle legislature on that and all that kind of stuff, that's a different animal. But if we can figure out mechanisms to fund this program one way or the other, then that's a better way to go, than not. So I just kind of thinking through that aspect of it.
I agree. I think there's a lot of things that we could do differently that before we get to some of the things that we're talking about here.
Because,
Yeah.
a lot of this, obviously, I'd love everybody to be on prudent if they can do it, right? But you said they may cross a threshold and they're out.
Yeah.
And But I'm trying to figure out that, how to, come up with the thought process of we're trying to get this paid for some other way that we can do to allow for this. Because I think, what's our ultimate goal? Our ultimate goal is to make sure the kids are educated and they're achieving at the highest level. Sustenance is important for that. And so that to me is part of this whole thought process. And I know we're not supposed to parent, but we're also trying to get ideal. If this was anything else, if I'm raising cattle, right, I gotta feed the cattle, right? That's the thing. You gotta get there, right? You can't just be like, oh, I'm just gonna not do that. And I'm not trying to say, but it's a part of that whole process in my thought process. So.
Yeah, by not feeding kids, it's a barrier to what we're here for, and that's teaching and learning. And
I think that, I might be wrong, but I think we are required to feed kids. Like, if we don't have a kitchen, we can't open school. That's something we learned through COVID. So there's not like an option to just not have a food program.
What I'm saying is we shouldn't, kids need to eat. When you have a child, your responsibility as a parent is to feed your child. And the kids should come to school fed with a sack lunch, could. And I know that we're not living a perfect world, and so if we can feed the kids and we have the facility, and obviously that's schools, we've created laws because it's been a problem for enough time that we've decided we're going to do that. I don't think we're gonna change that. So, yeah, how do we come up with a solution? And like Nick's saying, I think parents should be accountable a little bit, or a lot of it, and there's gonna be misses. And I think of an end of year fundraiser to pay down or pay off the balance at the end of every year could be a good way to end the year, wrap up the year. Something to do to finish the year and reset the balance and try again. But it's not, you don't stop calling the parents and telling them they have a balance that they owe and seeing if it gets paid off. But if it doesn't.
Yeah, I think my overall, and that's why I wanted to see if I can figure out how to pay this program for it, is that then it doesn't just reward bad behavior. Because then if you're just paying down people who are just not paying balances, the people who are paying balances, they're still having it. And so it's basically rewarding bad behavior. And that's what I try to get away from. So I figure out how to pay for the system that never benefits. And that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how we do that so that everyone benefits. Then even the people who normally would pay, they don't have to pay anymore. Now I'm benefiting them because they were responsible. So I'm trying to figure out that mechanism of how not to reward, because that's what I feel bad, and I do. I feel terrible when we get these huge, greater families like paying for this, and it's basically the same groups of people that just know that they wait till Christmas and they're gonna get their balances paid. All the responsible ones are not. They're paying their balances all the time.
Well, even I would say if we had some kind of fundraiser or some kind of mechanism, then we could maybe lower the prices.
Yeah.
That, we know that amount goes in and then that would help fund everything.
I know there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, and I'm looking at this from a different angle. I believe God calls us to feed the hungry. And some people aren't getting it done for whatever reason. And so I don't think it's rewarding bad behavior. I look at like a fundraiser that the whole school can participate in, is we're all chipping in to feeding the hungry. And instead of looking at it as we're rewarding bad behavior, we're just doing something positive. But I see where you're coming from too. The more entitlement programs we have, the more they're going to get taken advantage of. And I don't think it should be our job to pay for everyone to eat. That's the parents' job, and if it's not gonna happen, we need to feed kids who are hungry.
No, good discussion.
And I can crunch the numbers on CEP. I think that's kind of where you're going with the, buy a school and, see what that costs.
Yeah.
It was
that would be helpful.
about 200,000 when we checked last time for the entire district, but Washington daily could be something like that, might be manageable.
Because, we had talked about that at one point in time, and that was, well, when you're there, and then would there be so much of a change? Where you have to pay for it before, now we're at this school, but
So that's
that
different.
was just part of the
That's-
process.
Yeah, and that's gonna, whatever that amount is, does have to come out of general fund, it can't come out of like food service fund. Right. Unfortunately.
All right, so, but yeah, obviously let's get the changes to 82 and 5. We can continue to figure out. Some more thought processes.
Yeah. Okay, in the packet, next page, this is also part of my superintendent's report for the June meeting. I just have some proposed committees, and makeup of those committees. Obviously, this is a recommended, list, and it could be something that we discuss, but governance to continue this meeting to, have discussions and make recommendations and talk about practices and strategies and communication plans like we're doing today. A governance committee, or a negotiation committee, when we are dealing with our collective bargaining groups. And then facilities to talk about, updates, changes, future planning. And then a school community relations committee to really help strengthen relationships both internally and externally. And what that makeup, and then curriculum and instruction committee, for things that we, bring into as far as what and how we're, working with kids. So those would be committees that I would recommend, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have all of those or that they have to have the same flavor that I have listed here. So, food for thought.
Yeah, no, I thought they were great. My only one thing is in terms of frequency of meetings, and this can obviously change, but school community relations, it seems like you go all on that before school starts.
Yeah, I agree, and I thought about that, and these could be flexible, but I was thinking the June or whatever, if it's August, that's the kickoff to what's the message this year? What's the thing that we want to, communicate, that there would be some planning around that. So certainly flexible at times. What I was trying to avoid was having so many meetings that we just meet and then we actually don't do.
Yep.
So I want to have some time in there too, so we can definitely modify the timing of those as well.
Otherwise, I think it covers all the big bases and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, I can't do any other.
The only other big ones I would have would be probably full, like, sometimes you have future planning boards, future planning committees, where you're really looking at 5, 10-year, 15-year plans, that kind of stuff. Most of this is like more immediate kind of things, so that would be the only other one I can think of, something to look at long-term planning.
I really feel like we should be doing that, exactly what you're talking about in the facilities area. Like, we really need to be thinking, 10, 20 years down the road, what's this look like for Hamilton?
Yeah, I mean, I think facilities, I also think curriculum and instruction too, and that would be the other part, that you're looking 5 to 10 years down the road, trying to see, obviously, it's hard to determine if they're, as I said, they're about to blow up mask, right? So it's, I don't know what they're gonna do there, so it's hard to determine what that's going to look like in terms of testing and all that kind of stuff, but at least how we're going to try to maintain programs and so forth going forward, both of those areas. Yep, cool, okay.
Calendar, so the calendar is on the agenda for approval, so you have a copy of the 27-28 calendar. Erica and Marlon and many folks contributed to this. We met with the teachers union and they did some surveying. That the results of that survey are in here. And it's interesting. So there's 47 respondents in the survey, and the percentage for one option and the percentage for the other option are essentially 50-50. I mean, There's one or two boats. And then you've got some themes in there about, you know, what's the best date to start and why is that the best date to start? Professional development placement, which Erica and the team look to move the alt PD days during the Thursday and Friday of the fair so that we could start a little bit later. So doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a permanent change, but I do think that there was some consideration for some of these changes. Erica, is there anything you want to add to any of this?
I would just say, like, you know, we really did try to hear what they wanted, but it did feel like when somebody wanted one thing, we wanted the opposite, you know? So just kind of trying to balance that, but the one thing that was really clear was the start date felt really early for pretty much every staff member, and so moving the all PD days down into the fair week felt like a good compromise. They don't have to attend those, but they can choose to attend those. And so that felt like a good compromise of moving at least 1 week down in August. So that's all I have, really. MEA days, in case I was at the last meeting, we still don't know for sure which days it will be that year.
Okay, any questions on that? It's not just Hamilton, I tell you, I've been in 3 districts and that's not the committee anybody wants to be on.
I've got a lot of questions, but we don't need them now. What is PIR? What is alternate PIR? You know, all that stuff. That's not for right now.
We can talk through that
We
sometime.
need a committee, a calendar committee too.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
All right, so next item is just the regular agenda. And so you've got, you know, personnel and regular things. We are getting some indication that we might have an audit done. Oh, maybe, I'm not holding my breath.
I'm not making any promises.
Yeah, but, we're hopeful and it's on there. So I'll just kind of run through the TR4s are, you know, for students that we can't necessarily get a bus to them, whether or not they're homeless or they live in a situation where the bus can't get to their location. So it's a reimbursement, mileage reimbursement for that. Next one is a Game 1 uniform contract. I don't know, Travis, do you have anything to?
Do you have?
Well, that's still one, yeah, we're on year like, I can't remember, 3.
So we don't need to do it.
So
No, we
nothing.
don't need to do this,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
5-year deal, we already signed.
Okay. Okay. Approving all of our current bus routes as is, so no changes to our bus routes for 26, 27. We'll have handbooks for you to look at. That's an informational item. We will have lists of property to dispose, things that we don't need anymore. We'll have lists for you there. We'll get approval or ask for approval to get rid of records that are due for being destroyed. Collective bargaining agreement, our collective bargaining with the classified union. We should have information about whether or not the contract is ratified by the union, hopefully by Friday or Monday. So I should have numbers back on that. We talked about the calendar and rental agreement still in the works with UM Bitterroot at the Westview property. And so that may or may not be finished at this time, but we'll leave it on there for now. Community service for the Roberts Run for the track team. And then a sublease with UM Bitterroot for Bitterroot Discovery Children's Museum. So they are requesting to use the Westview property for the museum for the summer, for July. Physical therapy services through Bitterroot Health for part of our special education services, so contracting that out. out-of-state travel for our fourth graders to go to the Yellowstone trip. You want to talk about that at all?
Sure.
Okay.
We typically go through the park and do, our trips with the park, but it's a lottery draw for dates and we drew November. So, knowing that would be a likelihood of being canceled due to weather, we decided to see if we could put together our own trip. And Tom Rendon did some good research and we have a good facility in Cook City that we can use. There's a community center across the street that we can do all the same, lessons and things that we would do if we were with the park. If they have an extra ranger, they've agreed to send one our way. But that still needs to be seen. But we feel like we've done the trip enough times, we can still put together a really good trip for kids. But in a more amenable time of the year. So we'll do 2 trips, one with the park in April and then one self-guided, I guess, in May.
Sweet.
Next item is the resolution for the amendment to the general fund budget. This was our first proposal, was on the last agenda. So this is a just in case sort of situation, but that is back on the agenda for this go round. And then transformational learning is a grant that we received that gave us a 6-year window to do some work, and it's been pretty instrumental in getting a lot of our certifications, our dual enrollments, and all of the things that I think are pretty darn innovative and pretty important for our district, especially moving forward. So this is a request to transfer money into the Flex Fund. We no longer get the grant, but we still have some work to do, and so we have 1 more year of eligibility in the grant. But so this would require us to transfer money into the Flex Fund so that we can continue some of those efforts into next year. And then we were not selected as a recipient for transformational learning beyond that. We did not get the phase 2 grant, which is a bummer, because we were doing some really good things. So this allows us to keep the ball rolling and keep making some of those important things that are really kind of future ready things for us. So that is also on the agenda, and then the committees. So that brings us to the end.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Any other stuff? Question? Easy. Okay. All right. Sounds good. I'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Reaching over and. Well, not on the chat.